describes Hashgacha Pratis in Eretz Yisrael. So it says, Hashem looks at this land, Meireshis Hashana, from the beginning of the year, Ad Acharis Shana, till the end of the year. So the Pasha says Hashem is looking at Eretz Yisrael all the time. But the Satmar Rav has just a shtickle diak. Legabe the Reshis, it says Reshis Hashana, the beginning of the year. When it says Acharis, it says Acharis Shana, the end of a year, not the end of the year. Little diak. Why is it Reshis Hashana, Acharis Shana? So he said that's the teva of a person. The beginning of a year, and Elul is already the beginning of the year. It's the year. This is the year. Everything is going to be gewaldic. By the end of the year, let's say Av, that's another year. So he says that in the Sephardic Kedusha on Shabbos, Hein galti eschem acharis kereshis. I'm going to redeem you at the end like I did at the beginning. So he says, when a Yid makes the end of the year with the same chashivas as the beginning of the year, that's when Mashiach comes. So my bracha is that the natural hislavus that people do have Elul, which is really the beginning of the year, although it's the end of the year technically, but it's the beginning, should be Ezras Hashem carry over the whole year, that even Chanukah, Pesach, Shavuos, so the whole year that Amir Hashem is coming up, Aleinu L'Taiva, should be a year in which you're still filled with Islavos and the like. And when it's Galti Eschem Acharis Kereshis, then the Geula comes. Okay. So I'm just trying to think a minute. We are learning the Sefer Even Shelaima, and for those who are new, let me just point out that the Even Shelaima is a likut. It's an anthology of teachings of the Vilna Gaon. So the Vilna Gaon did not write the Sefer. The Even Shelaima is a likut of teachings of the Gaon, mainly from Mishlei, but the truth is from many other Sfarim as well. And everything is footnoted, etc. And the author of Even Shelaima, the one who compiled it, this is like the late 1800s, was initially Rav Shmuel Malson, who was one of the Gaonim in Vilna, and it was augmented and added to by his son, Rav Yitzchak Malson. So you have two Malson, father and son, who are the Mechabrim of the Even Shelaima. Now, Rav Yitzchak Malson actually is famous. He actually was more famous than his father in the sense, because Yitzchak Malson also was a big Mechadesh in Nigla. He wrote the Sefer Shavisa Shabbos, which is actually a very chashuv Sefer on Melechas Shabbos. And he also wrote the Perish. If you ever see something called Siddur Hagra, Ishay Yisrael, if you've ever seen that. So the Perish of Ishay Yisrael is from Rav Yitzchak Malson. Very beautiful Perish on the Siddur. So Rav Yitzchak Malson is also very meforsim. And I've never seen the original edition of the Even Shelaima. I never saw Rav Shmuel's edition alone, but Yitzchak Malson apparently doubled the size of the Chibur itself. And as you see, as you go through the Even Shelaima, in the text is generally speaking a paraphrase from the Gra, and then in the footnotes it tells you where it is, and it also is marich on different pratim. So I think we were zocha to do one parak. We did parak Aleph of the Even Shelaima, and then we began. We did parak Beis too. We did two parakim. We are up to parak Gimel, but I'm just thinking right now that maybe in light of Rosh Hashanah and the like, maybe we could skip something for now and focus on parak Dalet. Again, we're going to go back, but I want to start from parak Dalet because it's more nogeya this time of the year. So this is parak Dalet of the Even Shelaima, right? Even Shelaima is a pun when the Torah in Parshas, actually in this week's Parsha, when the Torah discusses the obligation of weights and measures, that your weights should not be false weights. They used to use stones as weights. Even Shelaima v'tzedek yelach. Your weight, your Even, should be Shelaima, should be perfect, a perfect weight. And in addition, Even Shelaima is a Rashi Teva. Even is Eliyahu ben Shlomo Zalman. That was the Gra's name. So Even Shelaima is both a perfection of the teaching, and it's a remez of the name of the Vilna Gaon himself, Eliyahu In fact, the Vilna Gaon said, actually, the Vilna Gaon taught every person's name is merumaz in the Torah. Now, if your name happens to be Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, or Moshe, that's pretty clear. Your merumaz in the Torah. But Eliyahu is not in the Torah, so someone asked the Gra, where is your name, merumaz in the Torah? And the Gra actually said, Even Shelaima, Yelach is Eliyahu ben Shlomo. So this is called Even Shelaima. So don't pronounce it Even Shlomo, that's a mistake, even though the remez is Shlomo Zalman, but it's Even Shelaima, based on the pasuk in Ki Seitzei. So now let's look at Perek Dalet. Again, we will go back, Mitzvah Hashem. Perek Dalet is called Bi'inyan Klal Darchei Avedas Hashem. This will be a general discussion of Avedas Hashem. B'chol inyanei milchemes hayetzer b'derech klal. And how do you wage war against the yetzer hara? Lahamainam, and this will be even to working people who are not full-time learning. Ubiyichud l'leim dei Torah, but there will be special hadrachot, special instructions to those who are zocheh to spend their time primarily learning Torah. So it begins. Kamo shahashmarim heim shimur liyayin kishehu shoket al shmarav. Right. So when you make wine, if you crush grapes, so you have what are called shemarim. Shemarim are sediment, the pieces of the grape peel and the like. And normally the wine is supposed to float on top of the sediment. The sediment is supposed to sink to the bottom, and then at some point the wine could be skimmed off. Right, and you don't have any sediment. So, in effect, though, it's important for the wine to be with the shemarim for a while, because the shemarim give taste. Right, the longer the shemarim are soaking in the liquid, the more the liquid absorbs taste. So, in a sense, the word shemarim, which means sediment, also means that which is shomer, that which protects, enhances the wine. Right, that's the double meaning. So he says, just like shemarim, sediment, shimor liyayin, protects the wine, meaning it makes the wine better. Kishehu shoket al shemarav, but that's only when the liquid is resting on top of the shemarim, and then you have good, clear liquid that's absorbing taste from the sediment. Aval kisha shemarim eilim lamaila. But when the shemarim are floating throughout the mixture, that's not good. Ein hayayin roi lishtia. Right? You can't drink it. Again, well, it depends. Today, we have different types of taste. Some people like orange juice with pulp. But in the classic view of Chazal, they said the pulp is something you want to get rid of. So generally speaking, the wine that has sediments floating through the liquid is not really ra'oi for shasiya. Ka chayetzer hara. Bizman shehu kafaf liyetzer taiv, mayel liyishav ha'olam, avol kisha'ela l'mayla mekalkel hakol. So this is a very, very fascinating teaching, and you'll see that this is taken from the Gra's Perish on Yeshayahu and on Rus. What is the idea here? The idea is that we have in our personalities, we have two yetzerim, right? We have the yetzer tov and with the yetzer hara. So generally speaking, you say, the yetzer hara is totally bad, evil. I got to ignore it. I have to push it away, and I should only follow the yetzer tov. The Gra says that's not totally emes. The yetzer hara serves a useful and constructive role in Avodas Hashem. Now remember the Rashi, which is really from Chazal, on Kriya Shema. V'ahavta es Hashem aleikecha, you shall love Hashem b'chol levavecha, with all of your heart, b'chol nafshecha, with all of your soul, u'v'chol ma'udecha, with all of your might. Rashi, again, it's from Chazal. What is levavecha? Lev is a heart. It should say b'chol libecha. Levav is almost like a double heart. So Rashi says the meaning of serving Hashem with all of your heart is bishnei yitzarecha, with all of your inclinations. You serve Hashem b'yetzer tov, and you must serve Hashem b'yetzer hara. That's b'chol livavacha. b'yetzer tov v'yetzer hara. So the question is very obvious. How do I serve Hashem with my yetzer hara? When I do mitzvahs and I learn, it's my yetzer tov. So there are a few different ways the Mefarshim learn. Just a simple question of what Rashi means. One pshat is, you serve your Hashem with the yetzer hara by not giving into the yetzer hara, meaning I serve it by having these urges that I don't give into, which means I'm not using the yetzer hara for care. I serve Hashem b'yetzer hara by being daicha the yetzer hara. But there's another pshat that you have to understand, that even the yetzer hara can be utilized in positive ways. One example might be learning Torah Shalol Lishma. What do Chazal say? Chazal say it's kedai to learn Torah and do mitzvahs, even Shalol Lishma, even if you're not doing it for the sake of God. Shemitoch Shalol Lishma, Ba'al Lishma. Now, Tosfos does ask a kasha, right? One Gemara says you should be Isaac, but Torah over mitzvahs, even Shalol Lishma, Shemitoch Shalol Lishma, Yavo Lishma. So there's still a madrega called Shalol Lishma. But there's another Gemara that says if a person learns Torah Shalol Lishma, it would have been better that he would have died when he was born. Mutav shetahapech shlilasay alpanav. That basically means that the placenta would have choked him when he came into, meaning his life is worthless. So which is it? So Taisvus Taka says there are two types of Shalol Lishma. One type of Shalol Lishma, even though it's much less than Lishma, still has a value. And that's mitoch Shalol Lishma, Ba Lishma. Another type of Shalol Lishma is totally evil. And Tosas' chiluk is Lakanter. Lakanter is, I learn Torah because I want to shame you. I want to be mavaza you. Or an example would be, an Apikaris learns Torah so he could, just like we, it's like the opposite of what a person is allowed to do. You're allowed to learn Apikaris in order to refute it. That's how you're involved, right? So that's a good thing. But lahavdil, unfortunately, there are people who learn Torah in order to refute it. That's called lakanter. I'm learning Torah with the kavana that I will be mavaza the people who keep Torah. Or, even if it's not a religious thing, I want to be mavaza Torah, but I'm learning Torah because I want to be mavaza you. I want to show you that you're an Amoritz, or the Rebbe's an Amoritz, or whatever it would be. That's lakanter. So lakanter, Taisvus says that's what the Gemara means. It would have been better had he not been born. Now, the shalol lishma that's acceptable, though, is oisher v'kavod. So if I learn because I want a good position, or I learn because I want people to think that I'm smart. Now, obviously, that's not a high level. That's not a high level. But still, mitaych shalol lishma, ba lishma. It'll get you there. So it turns out that my yetzer hara can be a legitimate motivator to get me to learn. I want people to respect me. I want people to admire me. Or even if it's just I don't want to be embarrassed. That's also, now it's not that I don't need the cover, but I don't want the busha. So I'm learning because I don't want to be the dumb guy in the shir. Now technically that's shalol lishma. Because technically, who cares if you're, they think you're dumb or you're smart. Okay. But mitayv shalol lishma, ba lishma, right? So the Gra is saying that sometimes your avodah in life is not so much to ignore the yetzer hara, but to use the yetzer hara in a way that motivates you to serve Hashem. And even though usually that'll be a shalol lishma level, there's a mitayv shalol lishma, ba lishma. Because imagine if the only avodah I had was to be kaiver the yetzer hara. So let's assume like this. People are going to, if I don't make a landing on this stuff today, my share is, everybody in the share is going to think I'm stupid. So then I tell myself, don't be a Baal Gaiva. It's your yetzer hara that says you worry about what people think. Well, so what's going to happen in such a case? I'm not going to learn, right? So you use your yetzer hara as a motivator. Mitoch shalol lishma ba lishma. So the Gra gives a very beautiful analogy here. He says, the yetzer tov is like yayin. Right? Yayin. Now, of course, yayin is sometimes described, the Torah is called yayin as well. But in this context, he's using Because yayin refreshes you, yayin revives you, yayin gives you simcha. So when I follow the derech Hashem, it's like good wine coming into me. The yetzer hara is like the shemarim, it's like the sediment, it's like the psilas that ultimately gets thrown away. But he says, when the psilas is in the wine and the wine is above the psilas, meaning the wine is dominant, then the shemarim makes the wine better. Masha ein kain, if the shemarim are floating throughout the wine, in other words, you're not using the yetzer hara to augment your mitzvahs, but it becomes like an equal partner in your life, so to speak, or maybe it even takes over, then it ruins the wine, and it's no good. So he's making this dimion that utilizing the yetzer hara in your avodas Hashem is like having wine floating on top of the shemarim, where the wine itself gets better by that particular process. Now, it's very fascinating that you actually have a vort in this parsha, a Hasidic vort in this parsha. So again, you have to be mevakesh mechila from the Gra to bring in a Hasidic vort in the Gra, but the emes is they're both moving in the same direction. We have in this parsha the parsha of Eishes Shefas Tayar, which is a whole bunch of problems. That's the woman captive in war, that the man is allowed to have a bia rishayna even though she's a goya. But then if he wants to continue the relationship, there has to be 30 days where she's repulsive, her hair is shaved, and her nails grow long. Ubachsa, and she cries for her father and mother for 30 days. And then and only then, you have reshus to marry her. But if you don't marry her, she has to go free. You cannot keep her as a slave, because since you put her through this suffering, she either becomes a wife, an equal wife, equal to every other wife, or she goes lagamri lecheres. As you understand, if I wouldn't have had intercourse with her, I could keep her as a shifcha. You capture somebody in war, they're a shifcha. But in this case, where you put her through this great difficulty, the only thing you can do is either marry her or set her free. You cannot sell her into slavery. You cannot keep her as a slave. Right? That's the parsha of Eishes Shefas Tayar. By the way, as an aside, although I don't want to go too beyond our inyan, you're allowed to have bia rishayna before all of the maisim. Right? The bia rishayna is mutter, kaidem kal hamaisim, even though she's a goya. Is the Torah legitimating rape? This is a very interesting question. The bia rishayna of a yafas Tayar, she's a goya, for sure the Torah is mattering that much. The Torah is mattering, and Rashi explains, because this is a concession to the yetzer hara. If the Torah would say usher, you would do it anyway, or at least some people would do it anyway, so the Torah wants to give you a framework. Okay, but say that. But what is the Torah mattering? Rape is a war crime. Rape of enemy women, so to speak, is a war crime under Geneva Convention and the like. Now, of course, that's not a kasha on the Torah per se, but even Geisha societies regard rape of women in time of war as a very, very horrendous thing. Is this what the Torah matters by Yafas Tayar? It's a kasha. So I will say this. I will say that there's a Taisvis Rid that actually says beferish that the heter of Yafas Tayar is only if she consented to it. It is not, so it's still a chiddush. It's a chiddush that she's a goya. Of course it's a chiddush, and you're not married. But l'chol hapachas, it is not a legitimation of rape. Now, I have to be honest, most Rishonim don't seem to follow the Taisus Red. But I think it's important even for kiruv purposes, because this may come up as a question sometimes, that the Taisus Red does not understand the parsha of Yafas Tayar as rape, but it's a heter of a one-time consensual sexual relationship. So it's a chashuv Taisus Red to be aware of. The Minchas Chinuch brings us. Okay. But still, it's a tremendous chiddush. It raises a lot of problems. Okay. The Orach Chaim brings, in the name of the Zayar, that the whole parsha of Eishes Shefas Tayar is a mashal for the neshama. The neshama is the Eshes Shefas Tayr, the beautiful woman. And it starts off like this, looking at the psukim. Ki seitzei la milchama ala yavecha. When you go to wage war against your enemy, so says the Zayar, that means you want to fight against your yetzer hara. The biggest enemy you have in life is the yetzer hara. Again, this is a drush, this is not pshat. Ki seitzei la milchama ala yavecha. So what does the pasuk say? Unesanai Hashem eleikecha biyadecha. God will give you victory. If you truly want to fight the yetzer hara, Hashem will give you victory, vishavisa shivyo, and you will capture back from the yetzer hara that which the yetzer hara took from you, your neshama, your goodness. You can get it back. So that's, in other words, that's a self-contained pasuk already. Now, then it tells you how. V'reisa b'shivya. You see in captivity, eshes shefas toar, a beautiful woman. That means you see your neshama kind of in the throes of imprisonment. In other words, a person comes to a hakara, a person remembers, just like you would remember a beautiful woman, a person remembers, oh, I used to learn, I used to daven, I used to feel close to Hashem. And now somehow my neshama is like imprisoned by this enemy. And I want to get it back. I want to get back who I was. I want to get back what I really am. But it's like it's imprisoned. It's imprisoned. So, this is all the Zohar giving it as a mashal. So, what do? So you gilcha es rosha, cut off her hair. V'yasasa es siprana, machlokas, but Rashi says that means let her fingernails grow. So this is a mahalech of tshuva, he says. So what you have to do is shave the head. The hair represents all of the false ideologies and machshavos zoros that a person has that is growing out of his head. Right? A person becomes very mu'ukam. Mu'ukam is crooked. Very makukal. You absorb so many crazy, idiotic ideas. Right? I mean, transgender, all of this stuff. You know, who is a woman? The whole thing. Who is a woman? What's the definition of a woman? Well, a woman is whoever, whoever says they are. Things that are so pashut. Everything now becomes makulkal. So, shaving the head is get rid of those false ideas. Be masake in the machshava. Now, fingernails growing. Now, when you have very, very long fingernails, we're talking about, really long, you're not going to be able to grab things so much. So that means disengage from the taivas of Eilam Hazeh, which involve grabbing things. So the two ideas are, work on your machshavos, your thoughts, both in terms, and now that itself has two components, in terms of get rid of the false ideologies, and also get rid of the fantasies of the imagination. That's actually two different processes. Let your fingernails grow, get less involved in acquisition, making money, possessions. And then it says, and let her cry for her father and mother. So says the Zayar, the father is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the mother is the Jewish people. My father is God, my mother is Am Yisrael. Because when a person sins, it's not just I'm hurting myself. I'm bringing tsar to the Shekhinah, and I'm hurting the Jewish people, because since Kol Yisrael Arev and Zelazah, since every Jew is responsible for each other, everything I do impacts on everybody. The famous mashal of the Yerushalmi, I've mentioned it before, and I'm sure you've heard it many times before. People are sitting on a boat, and under my seat there's a hole, and the water is coming in, and they want to fix the hole. And I say, mind your own business, it's under my seat. But the answer is, if the water enters under my seat, the whole ship is going to sink. This is what Klal Yisrael is. A person might say, although it's pretty stupid to even say this, says, What do you care? If I want to go to hell, I'll go to hell. That's my business. Yeah, even that is a very foolish remark. But a person might say that. It's none of your business. The answer is, it is my business. Because if this ship sinks, I'm going to sink with it. So, a person cries over what they did to Hashem, Kaviyachal, and what they did to Am Yisrael. Bachsa esavia ve'esima. And then it says, how long does she cry? Yerech yamim, a month of days. Says the Zohar, Zeh Chodesh Elu. You see how everything fits in here? In other words, you see the beautiful neshama captured by this enemy. You want to reclaim it. So, shave off the head. Get rid of the false ideas. Get rid of the acquisitiveness that a person has. Cry and introspect over the pain that you caused Hashem and the pain that you caused the Jewish people. And the time that this takes place is the month of Elul. And then it says, you will then be able to be reunited with your neshama. V'achar kach tavo eleha. You will be reunited with the neshama, ubealta, and be intimate with your neshama. Get to know your soul. Get to know yourself. Get reacquainted with that part of you that's good and pure. So this is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful remes that the whole mahalech of tshuva is merumas in the parsha of Eisha Shafas Tayr. By the way, just as a little aside, we say, I cry over my father, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because I brought pain to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So people sometimes raise the question, if I do Averos, am I bringing pain to God? I mean, God is perfect, right? You say God doesn't need anything that I do. So does God get joy when I do mitzvahs? Does God get pain when I do Averos? How can we talk about my actions causing tsar or pain or joy to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So it is very, very clear that there's a tremendous tsar to the Shekhinah, but that's because the Shekhinah's tsar is that we are ruining ourselves, meaning Hashem's pain is the pain of a Yid who is unable to connect to Hashem because of their Averos. So Hashem's pain would be, on human terms, let's take human terms, the pain that a father has when they see their child suffering. So it's not that the father is physically suffering, but the father loves the child so much that the father may feel much more pain than the child. Right? That's the old line when, I don't know if any of you ever got hit by your parents. By these days they don't do it anymore. But the old line that fathers used to say before they gave a patch to their child is, this hurts me a lot more than it hurts you. So the witty little child, Keneged Halacha, would say, so Dad, let me hit you, that way it'll hurt me more than it'll hurt you. I said, I want to I'd rather take the brunt of the punishment, so let me hit you. But okay, again, Isra D'Oraisa, but okay, but that's what a kid might say. So yeah, the tsar of Hashem is tremendous. It's tremendous because of what our neshama is suffering when it's separated from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's reminiscent. I've told the story before, so forgive me. A beautiful story with the Chafetz Chaim. That they say a Maisa that a kid was caught, a kid in Radin, a bacher in Radin, was caught smoking on Shabbos. Was caught. That's a pretty chomer thing. So he had to go see the Chafetz Chaim. Now remember, you have to understand, the Chafetz Chaim was not Rosh Hashiva of Radin. In fact, the Chafetz Chaim had no position at all in Radin. The Chafetz Chaim was the Chafetz Chaim, but he was not an active Rosh Hashiva, and he was not even the active Mashgiach. He was the founder, and he was the presence. So the average bacher never even saw the Chafetz Chaim a lot of times. Or we just see him in the Beis Medrash or whatever. But for this bacher had to see the Chafetz Chaim. And the bacher was terrified. He was so scared. he was going to see the Chavetz Chaim. I mean, the Chavetz Chaim is going to strike him dead or put him in Gehenna right away. Like, what's going to happen? So he goes to the Chavetz Chaim's house, and the Chavetz Chaim was very short. The boy was 15. He already was taller than the Chavetz Chaim. And the boy is like tittering. He's shaking. He's trembling. He's mamish, so scared. And the Chavetz Chaim, well, actually, I left out a certain part of the story. So the story goes that this boy went to see the Chavetz Chaim, and the boy changed his whole life. 5 minutes with the Chavetz Chaim, the boy became a tzaddik the rest of his life. So the speaker who was telling this story, like 15 years ago, said, if I only knew what the Chavetz Chaim said, I would have the secret to motivation. I could change the world. So from the back of the room, there was a very old man with a walker who got up laboriously and said, Ani hagever, I am the man. That never happens to me, I don't know. The actual Baal HaMaisa got up and said, I was the boy. So obviously the big question is, what did the Chavetz Chaim say to you? He said, I came in, I'm shaking, I'm tittering, I'm trembling. And there's the Chavetz Chaim, short, small, bent over, very old. And the Chavetz Chaim, because of Anava, usually looked down. In fact, when you ever see, there's a little video of the Chavetz Chaim, and they retrieve the video just for like 10 seconds. Chavetz Chaim b'derech klal looked down, but then he looked up to look at my face. And the bright blue eyes Chavetz Chaim had. And he took my hands in his hands. And there were tears that came from his eyes. And they fell on my fingers. And it felt like fire. The hot tears. And all he said was, Shabbos, Shabbos, Shabbos. How could it be? And he saw in the Chavetz Chaim's eyes such a pain, a tsar over the Shekhinah who suffered, and a tsar and a rachamim over me who was not keeping Shabbos. But what are you doing to your neshama? And I felt at that moment the tremendous love the Chavetz Chaim had for me, and I said, there's no way I could ever do this again. Now it's interesting why the Chavetz Chaim would have a bigger reishim than the Ribono Shel Olam, and that's an interesting psychological question. But l'maisa, I think most of us would be the same way, that somehow it's harder for us to relate to the Ribono Shel Olam than to a great, great gadol. But what you then have to do is you have to make a kal v'chomer by infinity. This is what the Chavetz Chaim, so he says, what changed me was feeling the Chavetz Chaim's tsar and not wanting to give him that tsar. And then I realized this is what Hashem, Kaviyachal, is going through, infinitely greater. And that changed me. That changed me. By the way, there is an act too. The Chavetz Chaim told the boy, you can't be in yeshiva anymore. So the boy was leaving, and the Chavetz Chaim said to him, where are you going? He said, well, the Rebbe just told me I can't stay in yeshiva. He said, you can't stay in yeshiva, but you stay in my house. I'll learn with you. He says, because Chavetz Chaim said, you can't be in yeshiva because you're a bad hashpah. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you. That doesn't mean I want you to go to the street. Right? So it's an interesting thing that you have to worry about two things. And this is something, in our Shema we have to be concerned about as well. On one hand, we have a yeshiva to run. We have talmidim. Negative, destructive influences. We have to sometimes contain and control because they could destroy things. But that doesn't mean you throw somebody out like a piece of garbage. This is still a Yiddish neshama. You have to care about them. You have to be metapel with them. You have to look for ways to help them in whatever way you can. You don't forget about the yachid because of the tzibor. We have to protect the tzibor. We have to care about the yachid. Now, people sometimes ask Akasha, isn't this what Chazal call chotei niskar, the sinner benefits? All of those good guys in Radin, who learn, Yom and V'layla, they don't get a chavrusa with the Chavetz Chaim. This guy smokes on Shabbos, and he gets a seder with the Chavetz Chaim. He says, what's going on? So maybe I should smoke on Shabbos. But the answer is Pasha. The answer is, Learning with the Chafetz Chaim is not as easy as you might think. You might think, oh, what a kavod, I learned with the Chafetz Chaim. Listen, you learn with the Chafetz Chaim, number one, obviously there's no Lashon Hara during the Seder. That's pretty clear. But there's no Dibur Chol at all. 4 hours is 4 hours. Not so easy. Sometimes people, think, oh, it would be great if I could learn with the Gadol Ador. I'd love to learn with Rebbe Yashiv. I'd love to learn with Reb Chaim Kanevsky. Wow. Yeah, the kavod is great. People say, wow, you learned with Reb Chaim Kanevsky. Right? Try learning with Reb Chaim Kanevsky. He's not alive, but when he was alive, try learning with Reb Chaim Kanevsky. See how long you'd last. How long would I last? It's not a pashut thing to learn with the Gadol Hador. It's not a pashut azach. Sometimes it's easier for us to learn with people who are closer to our madrigas. Okay, so now I want to be mamshech of this. Eventually, you're going to see how I'm going to connect this to the Gra's point there. It's a long connection. We know that there are two types of milchamais, two types of wars that exist in halacha. One is called milchemes mitzvah. These are milchamais that we're mechuyev to fight. Milchemes mitzvah is the war to eradicate Amalek, the war to eradicate the 7 nations that inhabited Canaan, and at least according to the Ramban, any war to conquer Eretz Yisrael. Because the Ramban Shita is, Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah d'oraisa. So according to the Rambam, we have Amalek and Shiva Amim. Like Ramban, we have a third category, which overlaps, of course, a war to conquer Eretz Yisrael. And the final category of Milchemes Mitzvah is a defensive war, that if people are being attacked, Yidden are being attacked, there's a mitzvah to come to their aid. That's called Milchemes Mitzvah because it's a mitzvah to fight those wars. But then there's another type of war that's called Milchemes Rishus. Milchemes Rishus is an optional war. Well, what would that be? Let's take over Saudi Arabia because of the oil fields. We can use some more oil. Now, that may strike you as very strange. The Torah allows a Jewish country just to declare a war of aggression. And by definition, we're not talking about to fight an enemy, because fighting an enemy would be milchemes mitzvah. So we're talking about fighting a non-enemy country, because I just want expansion. So the Torah allows that? That sounds pretty bad. But the rule is, milchemes rishus has all sorts of conditions. Number one, you need a melech. Okay. You need a Sanhedrin. And number three, this is the biggie, you need the Urim v'Tumim, which basically means Hashem has to give you permission, meaning Milchemes Rishus doesn't work unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu said it was okay. Which is why, Bisman Hazeh, we don't have Nevuah, we don't have Urim v'Tumim. It is not Shayach a Metzias of Milchemes Rishus, Bisman Hazeh. In fact, the only category of milchama that would be legitimate today, we don't have the 7 nations, we don't have Amalek, we don't identify Amalek. So a defensive war, a war of defense, is still a milchemes mitzvah, even mizman hazeh. Now this raises huge questions. This is not the time to talk about that, because the Mishnah in Saita says that all of the exemptions of fighting milchama are only milchemes rishus, not milchemes mitzvah. Milchemes mitzvah, everybody has to fight. So interesting question about B'nai Torah going into the army. Okay, ein kan mekaimai laharich. It actually deserves a share, but this is not our subject right now. Okay. Now, given this distinction between milchemes mitzvah and milchemes rishus, which milchama is the parsha of Eishes Shafas Toyer talking about? So Rashi says it's talking about B'dafka e milchemes rishus, because since it says v'shavisa shivya, you capture people, in the milchemes mitzvah against Amalek, there are no survivors. You kill men, woman, child. So Rashi says, again, this is all from the Sifri. Rashi didn't make this up. It's from Chazal. Rashi says the whole parsha of Yafas Tayar is talking about milchemes rishus and not milchemes mitzvah. So here's the problem. The problem is, how do you reconcile that with the Zohar's allegory? Meaning you say the following. There is, of course, a pshuta shel mikra that Yifas Tayr is talking about having bia with a woman and then taking her into your house. And Rashi says that only applies to milchemes rishus, not milchemes mitzvah. Although one could ask a kasha in Svara, if the Torah is giving a concession to the yetzer hara, aren't there going to be yetzer haras by milchemes mitzvah too? Yeah, that's a kasha, but that's the halacha. But here's the problem. If you go with the Zohar, that merumas in the parsha of Yifas Tayr is the milchemes hayetzer. So if I were to ask you, is the milchemes hayetzer a milchemes mitzvah or a milchemes rishus? 100%, it's the greatest milchemes mitzvah that there is. So the kasha that I'm asking is the following. If the parsha of Yifas Tayr is talking about a milchemes rishus, why would it be the vehicle to give a mashal for the milchama of the yetzer hara? You wouldn't talk about the milchemes hayetzer in the parsha of milchemes rishus. You should talk about it in the parsha of milchemes mitzvah. Ein lecha mitzvah gedayla mizu. You hear the disconnect. On one hand, it's a milchemes rishus parsha. On the other hand, it's marames to the milchemes hayetzer. That seems to be a stira. So the teretz that the Svarim give is a very deep teretz, but this will bring us back to the Gra's very short remarks. That even though the milchemes hayetzer is a milchemes mitzvah for sure, you don't fight it like you fight a milchemes mitzvah. You fight it like you fight a milchemes rishus. So the milchemes hayetzer is a milchemes mitzvah that is fought like a milchemes rishus. What do we mean? What is the nafkamina in terms of battle techniques, battle strategies, between a milchemes mitzvah and a milchemes rishus? A milchemes mitzvah, and I don't mean a defensive war, but a milchem against Amalek and the 7 nations. The Torah says beferish, lo sechaya kol neshama. When you fight the 7 nations, your aim is total annihilation. Man, woman, child. You destroy. You obliterate. Lo sechaya kol neshama. By a milchemes rishus, you have the right to kill the combatants, those who are fighting, but you don't have to obliterate. The women and the children should not be killed. Even the men who are not fighting don't get killed. So the nafkamina, and that's why slaves, Eved Kanaini, that's why the word Eved Kanaini is such a misnomer in some ways. Eved Kanaini literally means a Canaanite Eved. Now, Canaanites are bedafka, you can't have an Eved from the Canaan. The Canaanim are the 7 nations that have to be killed. So an Eved Kanaani is primarily a prisoner of war, not from the Canaanite nations. You see, Eved bedafka. It's a little mudna why Chazal used the expression of, the Torah doesn't use the word Eved Kanaani, but Chazal used the expression for the Eved Kanaani, even though bedafka, b'derech klal, a Kanaani will not be an Eved. So, milchemes mitzvah is total obliteration. Milchemes rishus is you capture and you subjugate. So now you see a beautiful understanding of why the milchemes hayetzer is merumaz in the parsha of milchemes rishus. Because what is being taught is exactly what the Gra says here. So this is a very long detour to come back to the Gra. And that is, your goal, at least until you're a real tzaddik, is not to destroy your yetzer hara. It's not to obliterate your yetzer hara, but to capture your yetzer hara and use it as a motivator in your avodas Hashem. In other words, make it your slave. Instead of you being a slave to it, it becomes a slave to you, meaning to your yetzer tov. And that's the characteristic of a milchemes reshus, where you don't obliterate the enemy, but you capture the enemy and you make it your slave. So you use your deficits, you use your chesronos to your advantage. Now this comes up in a lot of ways. For example, if I have low self-esteem and I want to learn so people will admire me more, so that's a motivator. Or the other way around, even the shtickle gaiva, I want people to admire me. Again, mitoch shalol lishma, it's shalol lishma, it's not the highest madrega, but it can get you there. Or let's say you have a person who has difficulty sitting for long periods of time. Right? They're restless, they have ADD, whatever it is, they don't have the sitzfleisch, being able to sit. So instead of just wasting time, they could figure out that they could organize mulava malkas. In other words, they could use their energy in ways that would be constructive. They can use their kochos, even if it's coming from a negative weakness. They use it in a positive way. And what you're doing is you're serving Hashem with your yetzer hara. And therefore it becomes like the shmarim, the sediment that's giving taste to the wine, using the Gra's own analogy. Right? A person uses their kochos. Or bichlal, one of the difficulties, many Bali Tshuva have, lav dafka Bal Tshuva, but is that a person develops certain interests and certain talents from their prior life. Right? They like to play music, whatever it is, sports, and now they want to become a ben Torah. Baruch Hashem, they come to a new realization, and they feel they have to give up all of that. They can't play piano anymore. They can't do this. They can't do that. And okay, that could be fine also. But what often happens is it's like an amputation. It's like you've cut off your arm, and there's kind of a depression within a person. There's a low-level depression, a certain sadness, because you're not able to express those things that brought you a certain measure of simcha. So how are you misyachish to it? Do you kind of say, well, okay, I'm giving something up, but all right, I guess I just have to give something up because I want to be a ben Torah. I just have to give it up. Yeah, I'm going to be sad, I'm going to be miserable. Again, you have to ask a shaila in every case. I'm not giving you a psak in anything here. But the problem with that is, if it really drags you down and it gives you atzvus and it gives you sadness, that's going to poison your avodas Hashem also. So sometimes, instead of cutting yourself off from those things that gave you a great deal of joy, you find a way to integrate them in avodas Hashem. Now, in some ways, Or Sameach might be better than other places. We have our orchestra, whatever it is. We taka say, oh, you guys are musicians, go and play your instruments and the like. I don't know if there's a mere orchestra. Probably not. And the like. But you see the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that sometimes the issue is not to destroy my past. The issue is to reclaim. And in fact, the emes is, this is a huge, huge topic. Many of you might remember, at least the older people, might remember of Nosson Tzvi Finkel, Zechrono Livracha, the great Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, and who was ill for many, many years, but was miskaber over all of the difficulties to be tremendous marbitz Torah, and a person who literally raised millions and millions and millions of dollars under tremendously difficult conditions. So everybody knows he has kind of a legendary story by now, famous story. He, of course, came from a frum family. I mean, he was the great nephew of his namesake, Rav Eliezer Yehuda Finkel, the son of the Alter of Slobodka, and the like. But he was raised in a more modern environment in Chicago, and he went to a co-ed high school. He was on the basketball team. He was on the debating team. And when he came to yeshiva after high school, He had never learned Gemara more than an hour at a time. An hour, that was it. So he's in Mir, and Lezer Yudel, the senior, set him up with Chavrusas, and they're learning 4 hours of morning study. This is unbelievable. He had never 4 hours of Gemara. He was like totally exhausted. So he then said to his Chavrusa, "So what do you guys do in the afternoon here? You go touring or what?" He says, "No, we have another Seder." He says he couldn't believe it, whatever it would be. So, but when he was in his co-ed high school, he was on the debating team, he was on the basketball team. And when he was nifter, he was very ill, but his death was not expected. He was nifter very suddenly. So I went, I went to Levaya. Anyone that was in Yerushalayim went to the Levaya. And all of the Hespedim had a certain common theme. And it was, look at a person who came from such a tamei environment, such schmutz, such dirt, such filth, and he was able to escape it, he was able to repudiate it, he was able to be mavatal it. Baruch Hashem, no matter where you come from, you can escape and become a great person. Well, that is a perspective. That's MS. But Aniyas Daitin, again, I asked Mechila from the Rabbanim HaMatzpidim, there was another Nekuda that was not emphasized. His godless was not only that he escaped his environment. He took from that very Saviva aspects that he incorporated in Avodas Hashem. One of the things he was famous for was his ability to talk to modern Orthodox kids. Kids would come from co-ed high schools themselves, and they would meet this Rosh Yeshiva of Mir. And they're walking into yeshiva, it's so unfamiliar to them and bizarre and strange. And they sit with this guy with a beard wearing a black coat. And all of a sudden, he starts talking about jump shots. I don't even have the basketball vocabulary and the vocabulary here and debating. And all of these kids are like staring at him. This guy knows about that. And he was able to connect to them by connecting to their experiences. And he showed them that they could also be B'nai Torah. You see what's going on here? He didn't destroy, he didn't reject that environment. He took from it, I found him, in which he was Makarev. That's anything to be concerned about? The fire alarm or anything? Oh, okay. Yeah. So you see what's going on here? He took what you might call the yetzer hara of his life, and he used it in Avodas Hashem. That's a big yesod. Now, there's another Rosh Hashanah, I'm not going to mention it by name, who also went through kind of a modern Orthodox environment, and he makes believe, again, it's L'Shem Shemaim, he has a reason. He makes believe that never exists. In fact, I get calls from his sister. His sister is very upset that this Rosh Hashiva denies that they lived in a modern Orthodox environment, because she says, the way we were raised was good. Our parents were good, and we had, good chinuch. Why is he making believe that the only chinuch that's kosher is like black hat charedi chinuch? But this is a person, again, a chashuv a person, and a person whose kavanah is lagamri l'shem shemayim, but he believes that he has to kind of repudiate that identity. But Rav Nosson Tzvi B'dafka didn't go with that mahalach. He didn't repudiate it. He took it, and he used it in Avodas Hashem. And I would suggest that this is a prat of serving Hashem with the Ra. And then, because otherwise you have a big kasha. The Eibishter determined where you would be born and what family you would be connected to. It was Hashem made that decision. Rabbeinu Bachya says in Parshas Kiseitze that you're actually asked ahead of time. In Shemayim, your neshama is asked, where do you want to go? And you say, I'll take the couple in South Dakota. Huh? If the pshat is that the only tayelas is getting away from it, then why would I choose to be in it? And also, Mitzad Hashem, it's not fair. Why does some guy get born in a frum home and has Torah from the beginning of his life, and the other guy has 20 years without it? Where's the yashras? But you understand, if the pshat is there's something you get from those 20 years, then you needed to be in South Dakota. You needed. It's not that your avodah is to make believe it never existed. You needed something from the South Dakota experience. And then you have to figure out, how do I take even the negative part, or the anti-Torah part, or the non-Torah part, maybe I shouldn't call it anti-Torah, and how do I bring it in? This is the idea of milchemes rishus. Not that you kill the Ra, but you capture it, and you use it, and you elevate it. Very, very profound. And that is why, sometimes, it's very easy in Eretz Yisrael to get an inferiority complex, right? You come to somebody's house who's been living in Eretz Yisrael for 300 years, and they have 50 generations of rabbis, and the 7-year-old knows more Gemara than you do, or more than I know, whatever it would be, and you kind of say to yourself, how will I ever catch up? How will I ever catch up? It's not shaykh. I'm never going to catch up. But the answer is, yeah. The person that has that background has all sorts of gifts that we will never have. But you have all sorts of gifts that he'll never have. It's not the pshat, he got a good deal and you got a bad deal. It's not how it works. You both got perfect deals. But your avodas are different. Your tafkidim are different. Your jobs are different. And just as his life was tailor-made for him, your life was tailor-made for you. And therefore, the issue is not, why couldn't I have had that life? You got the life that was right for you. So that's why it's a complicated avodah, because on one hand, as you become a Baal Tshuva, there's a lot of pressure to kind of move away from that. And that is necessary. But at the same time, you also have to know to take from it. You take things from it as well. It's not just moving away. Moving away would be milchemes mitzvah, obliterate, amputate. But milchemes rishus is capture it, take it in, incorporate it, make it a positive feature. Right? So there's a very, very deep point in serving Hashem with the yetzer hara. Okay, be well and have a good show.